name is Logan Lowery. I am from Birmingham, Alabama, and I am one of the composers for this film. I feel like the main thing I contributed was the theme, and then Joe kind of expounded on that and orchestrated it quite brilliantly. While had some of my own little musical moments and cues in there as well. But yeah, that was my contribution.
I let Logan pretty much compose mostly on his own, but I gave him a lot of stuff to prepare with. He started with the script for the entire movie. I gave him this YouTube playlist with different songs that inspired me as I was writing it, and different things that I thought that the soundtrack could be inspired by. And this had stuff like The Dark Knight. This had stuff like Spider-Man. It's a superhero movie, and you want to draw from some of these sounds, but there was also stuff that was a little more subtle. Because of course there was The Dark Knight, but then there was also The Last Temptation of Christ, and I used that all over my temp scoring. And I love this kind of more atmospheric, kind of dark tone, and there's a lot of pondering. This is a movie where you spend time with people just thinking and processing things. And I wanted that to be reflected in the music. This is a music about people thinking and making decisions. Ultimately, the whole movie is just about a man making a choice. And so the music should reflect that and all the nuance that comes with making this choice.
When you sent me the playlist, the inspo playlist, and I saw Batman Arkham Asylum on there as this part of the score, I was like, ooh, that's fun. That sounds like a lot of fun. And then after talking with you and kind of narrowing in on that sound and on the not just the vibe or the idea behind the film, but the flexibility that you were presenting as well, with make it your own, do what you think is right with it rather than confining it to a particular box. And so having the opportunity to play with some of those sound colors and that soundscape and palette was the biggest appeal for sure in getting involved in this project. And I got that right out of the gate. That darker, heavier, thicker texture is not something that I have had a lot of experience creating, but two, it's one that I love to listen to. And so that was the biggest inspiration for it, or why it grabbed me so much, is because it was, this is an opportunity to play with some of these things that I really enjoy listening to. Because I grew up on things like the Arkham games, and Batman and the vigilante style movies, and ergo their soundtracks. And so having the opportunity to kind of bring that sound to life and provide that character to the characters on screen was just really exciting. I like the whole vibe. To me, is as if you're on the seashore at night, and you're just watching these dark ocean waves billow in, and you hear it, and it's just this subtle kind of churning, and you don't really see where it is, but you can feel it all. And it had that kind of, everything about the atmosphere of the film gave me that sense, and I felt like the music was already on that right track, based on things that you'd sent me, that you'd done, and reference tracks, and some of the stuff that I did as well.
I think soundtracks, like many parts of a film, are important, but I think they're really important just because they can really sum up a feeling in a moment, or they can summarize a theme even. I think when a triumphant moment is happening, and there's that triumphant roar of trumpets in the soundtrack, and it's like, oh man, this really embodies this idea.
So a lot of the times what I'll do is I will sit down with either a synth or just a string suite or something like that on my MIDI, and mess around with some chords before I even hit record, and watch it and play it back, and then play around with some different tonal ideas or rhythmic ideas. And then if there's something that I particularly like, I will just go with that. And I'll start using that, and I'll start fleshing some of those ideas out and orchestrating it in different, taking out some of those larger chords and fleshing it out over the course of an orchestra or whatever instrument selection I have. And then after that, the biggest thing is thinking about the direction of it. Where is it starting? Where does it end? And what happens in the middle? And how do we keep it interesting tonally and rhythmically and melodically? While also one of the things that I think is very challenging for a composer sometimes is having too many ideas, and trying to do too many things instead of fleshing out one theme. It would have been very, very easy with all of the different ideas that were going on in the film to have a theme for each one of them. But at that point, it's too much. It becomes, too much of a good thing. And so having to like limit myself and say, okay, I have 2 real themes and they're kind of the same. Like it's the one was this building minor 6 interval, blah, blah, and that's really cool. But then it also, bum, 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 and that kind of thing. It's the same interval. It's a different, 2 different halves of it. So playing with that and trying to keep it all familiar. That's, I think, one of the ways in which when you look at the whole storyline and the whole score, familiarity, and the sooner you can develop that familiarity in a film score, the more effective that film score is going to be, because you are able to do more with it and use it to, for lack of a better word, or actually no, I think this is a good way of looking at it, to manipulate emotions, which is what you're in the business of doing when you're scoring for anything. You're trying to stir people's emotions, and the best way to do that is by using something that they're familiar with. So if you can establish that familiarity early on. So that's a long way of saying using 1 or 2 themes. That was a lesson that I learned after having scored my first feature. I think I probably had too many themes going on. And so I needed to have used fewer. So having that opportunity to sit down and only deal with really one theme was really cool. But you start with that idea and figure out, how can we make this musical statement several times in different ways that are still familiar. It's an interesting task that we have as film composers, but it's quite a lot of fun. The track for the bad trip scene in particular, that one was surprising, because like I started doing it I started making it with just blocked chords, and mainly using augmented chords and some random dominant chords that didn't really make sense if you were to write it down in music theory. But it's not supposed to make sense. It's an eerie kind of scene. Playing around with some of that was very surprising to me, because I started adding in, it's Bob Ross everywhere. You have happy little accidents where you start adding things in, and the way that they line itself up to, like, it doesn't work. In that particular scene, musically, it doesn't work, but that's what you're going for. So it does work. I don't know. It's a fun process.
I think Logan's music ended up embodying exactly what I wanted out of the music. I think it totally complements the story, and I think it's just because I think he understood what I was going for. We had a solid conversation before he started scoring about, what is the point of this movie? What is it about? What am I trying to say? What is this character going through? And how's the audience supposed to feel? And I think because of that, I think, there was never any issues with his music.
I really appreciated the approach, because one of the, as I'm sure you're aware, one of the very most difficult things for a film composer is to talk to directors, because directors know what they want out of the music, but they don't know what they want the music to be. And it's your job to translate that. I had a director one time, I was doing a spot session with him, and he was like, yeah, right here I want twinkly music. I was like, right, twinkly. You don't know what that means. I don't think you know what that means. It was a real Princess Bride moment. I can't stand that. And you having musical knowledge, there was not that ever. That never happened. Not only that, but you gave me that spreadsheet with all the cue sheets and said, here are the reference tracks for this specific scene. And there were a couple of them where you were like, yeah, go loose, do your thing on this one. But then on this one, maybe reel it in, keep it simple, because this is the need for this scene. And I respect that. I respect having that, like, hey, there are moments that I can just let it loose. But there are other moments where you have to reel it in and stick to some kind of form or convention or whatever it is. That is a really, really cohesive directing style when it comes to my creative style. I've done a lot of theater and that kind of thing. And I had an director that would not, if it was Snow White, I remember, and somebody said, um, my lady, the princess, instead of I, the princess, my lady, or something like that. And she was like, nope, stop, everybody stop. You said it wrong. I was like, it just was like this mechanical kind of, you have to stick to this every single time. And that drives me nuts. That's not how art works, and I didn't get that at all with this project, which was part of what made it such an enjoyable experience.
And that's part of being an artist, and that's part of collaborating and working with different people, is that balance of, all right, let me guide you and try to get exactly what I want, or let you express on your own. And I did try to give Logan a lot of freedom there, and I didn't want to get in his process too much, because in my eyes, his music was only going to be better if he could make it the way he wanted to make it, if he could express the mood and understanding what I was going for, but make something within that he wanted to make. And I think because of that, the music feels more honest and more raw, and the emotions are true to what I wanted to express, because I didn't get in the way too much.
Letting that individuality and mutual creativity kind of come through, rather than isolating it to one person's creativity. That's what separates good storytellers and good artists from the rest of people, I think.
I think where I really like it is probably just the moment where there's not really any dialogue and we're seeing those messages, both between the McMahon family, and then of course we're seeing like social media's reaction to Maxwell Peterson's television interview, and it's this sort of kind of dire tone. It's this sort of that I think really is a good way, in my opinion, is maybe summarizing how Max is feeling reading all this. He's seeing the city sort of turn against him and say, actually, like, what you're doing isn't cool. It's not enough. Like, this is like you expect us to kind of start like being like, oh man, Max, like, worshiping the ground you walk on. Like, that's not happening.
For reference, I think that the two biggest, the way that I see it, and you may disagree, but the way that I see it and our differences is you are a lot more savvy with texture than I am. It's whereas like I will be more content to build on a slower building chord or stretch something out. You have a lot going on at one time. Not to reference what I said earlier about too much of a good thing. Like it's honed well, and it is put together like it needs to be, but it's a lot more complicated orchestration. Some of the pieces to have that in your head, and be able to, I imagine, hear it and see it so clearly, to be able to translate that into a DAW, really, really cool. I'm a largely improvisatory musician in general, and that comes out of my composition at times. I want it to feel like it's just kind of like spilling out, and so it lends towards simpler things. Sometimes it's laziness. Sometimes I'm like, how can I achieve the same thing without having to go this really long way around of getting a big orchestral sound, which is something that I have to work on more. But it's having that fastness and complexity with the simplicity and stillness, I think that's what makes it complementary. Because you need both of those things at times in music, and the ability to just sit, but the ability to keep moving at the same time. I don't know. So it's a cool balance that I think the score strikes between our two styles.
I do like the ending song. Like they kind of, I was talking about like songs that can sound kind of victorious and kind of like this show of like triumph for our character. I feel like that's what we kind of get at the end with Max. I would say that's probably my second favorite, because it is like, it's very hopeful and kind of, there's this disease and we don't know what's going to go on, but we're seeing in this moment, and this music is highlighting this, that Max is going to try and make this change. What may come of it, who knows, but he's going into it feeling a lot better, a lot happier, and it's better for himself, and it's better for everyone else, obviously, that he's not selling these drugs, but it's this moment of personal triumph, especially in the music, I think highlights that really well.
One of the aspects of my compositional style is the stillness at times, and there are times in the film where that stillness is is necessary. It's demanded by what's happening on screen. And I think that the music that I provided, specifically in places like that bad trip, or in the moments where there's like this building tension, and I was inspired a lot by the Dark Knight score and Hans Zimmer and a lot of his work of those kind of swells. And I love swells. Swells are my favorite. And I think I was able to add several moments of that where the tension is swelling, and it's not something that a pulse is necessarily going to get after. There are times when that is necessary, but I think the majority of the places where my music was used and where I composed for it was with that in mind, of trying to build that kind of tension. Overall, the movie, it's the way that it's laid out is very interesting, because it's like it's expository right from the jump. You jump into it and it's like, oh great, I know what I need to know about these characters' backgrounds right here, except with the exception of the Night Terror, because who is he? What does he do? Is it someone's conscience? Is it an actual person? I don't know. I feel like that's left up to the audience to decide a little bit. I don't know. Good thing is that I'm talking to the writer right now, so I suppose he could answer that one. But it builds that tension of man's ambition with man's limitation, and that's something we talked about very early on in the way that that's woven into the film. I think that there's a lot of really good stuff in there where that is concerned. I think that the ambition was absolutely there with the film, and the execution with the resources and the time and the intentionality behind everything. I think it's a really, really cool thing to have been a part of, and I'm thankful to have been a part of it, for sure.